thanks for having me. I'll jump right in. So I'm here representing my lab. So I'm the PI here, but as you can tell, lots of us in the lab, lots of students, three of us as faculty and some full-time staff as well. And the question we're focused on in my lab is what could we do to develop a system to check compliance for online retailers? And we've mainly focused on tobacco retailers, and for some of the reasons that Surratt mentioned, there's lots of enforcement that happens with them, but we're also moving into other substances like cannabis and alcohol, and we're transitioning the methods. Currently with alcohol, we have a grant going that's extending this system to alcohol. But why do we need this first? Just to intro into it. So when I was up at Stanford doing my postdoc, I worked in Dr. Lisa Henriksen's lab, and her lab studies how to do effective compliance checks in retailers. So the main thing she focuses on is sending groups of people into stores to check compliance for lots of different things. So here's an example of a signage law. So this store would be out of compliance because the signage is at child's height. So in California, we have a law that it has to be at least at an adult's height, or preferably behind the counter. But more recently, a compliance check is also serves to look for products. So in the state of California, we have a law that went into effect a couple of years ago that bans all flavored tobacco products. And there's been some updates to that law that we'll get into. But in Kentucky, for instance, a compliance officer might go look for a vape. As I understand now, you guys have a vape ban. The problem that I saw with this is all of these systems, including at the state level at the time, only focused on brick and mortar retailers. And that's a problem, especially. And so when I was up in her lab, it was during COVID, all of these vape shops couldn't be open. So if they wanted to stay in business, they had to find a way to sell products. And a lot of them learned how to sell them online. That market is already big. So in the US, some estimates suggest it's around $31.5 billion industry, and it's projected to double by the end of the decade. So it's not going anywhere. So for me, it suggested, what would we do? How would we do an online enforcement system? The other problem with this is it's not covered in lots of laws, including in California at the time. So our law is how it's enforced. The SB 793, that's our flavor restriction, is enforced at tobacco retailers. And here's the definition of what a tobacco retailer is. So a tobacco retailer is a person who engages in the state of sale of tobacco products from a retail location. And that means a vending machine or a place where products are sold, a physical building. And so does this cover online sales? Doesn't seem like it to me. When this law went into effect, they actually discussed online sales in the law, and the representative said specifically it didn't cover online sales. So ostensibly, flavored products could be sold into the state online. What we found is when that law came into place, online shopping increased. So this is one proxy measure of online shopping for vaping products. So this is the blue line represents weekly Google queries that are indicative of shopping for vapes. So things like, where can I order vapes online? It bounces around, there's a bit of noise in it, but then it comes up to this vertical line there, which is right the week when the flavor restriction came in. And you see this pronounced spike that stayed elevated for 6 weeks in the case of vapes. And then here's the same one for cigarettes. And that stayed elevated for 11 weeks. And so the trends in other states are a bit noisier than California's. But you didn't see a pronounced spike on the day our law came into effect in places like Arizona, Nevada, or Oregon. So it's suggestive of that the law might be what is actually pushing people to shop because they're worried about either their products are going away or they can't get them at a store by them. This is what a search on around the time of the study would look like when I executed it here in San Diego. It returns for these retailers. All of them you could buy literally thousands of flavored products from and have them shipped to San Diego, or at least it appeared they would ship it to me. So in addition to the state law, lots of other jurisdictions within a state, including California's, also can set their own policies. So in the case of flavorings, this is, oh wait, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So the state responded to this by now including online sales. They pointed out, we pointed out this out in this research, and they responded it and they amended. So now they do include online sales. Still unclear if they're doing anything to check compliance to it. And then in addition to state laws, local licensing can help to get a handle on it. So for example, in the county of San Diego, we have a requirement that all sales are done in person. It's unclear whether or not that in fact happens, and you wouldn't really know until you go about checking that out. So part of what we're doing is helping agencies like this come up with systems that they might use to do such compliance checks on online retailers. So state laws can cover this, local laws can cover this. We also have a federal law that covers online sales. It's called the PACT Act. It sets requirements for delivery sellers, including that they register with the ATF and state tax authorities. They have to maintain monthly sales and tax reports and send them to ATF. There's also a requirement that they not use the United States Postal Service. So sending tobacco for a retail purpose through USPS is a federal violation. It also requires that the delivery sellers abide by the state and local ordinances. So for example, our California's flavor restriction, it's not only a state infraction if it occurs, it's now a federal infraction because those delivery sellers are obligated to follow our state law. Also true for a local license. And it gives state and local authorities an ability to appeal to federal courts for injunctions against retailers. And it even lets cities and tribes do this. So it's a pretty strong federal law. Many in the tobacco control world have not known about it quite as much because it's kind of for the, I suspect for the reason before of like assuming online sales is like a pretty small thing, which it has been up until COVID. And now it's a big and growing business. So lots of teeth to this law too. The CEO of the company could go to jail if they're a repeat offender. There's scaling fines and up to incarceration. I'm not aware of anyone ever going to jail for violating this policy, but it's a possibility. Okay, so that's a little bit of a setup for the main things that we focus on in my lab. And I'll go through how we do compliance checks and what we've found, mainly focusing on what we found. And then I also want to discuss another type of product that we're seeing lots of these retailers selling. One that Surratt mentioned briefly, Delta 8 THC. And I'll go into more in depth into that. And then briefly touch on a few other ones that might be relevant to you that we haven't mentioned yet. So diving in first with doing compliance checks online. This is funded by a granting mechanism in California called TRDRP, Tobacco Related Disease Research Program. This is a granting agency that takes tax appropriations on tobacco and funds health-related research, tobacco-related research. Our goal in these studies is to understand how online tobacco retailers are operating, what their marketing practices are, and we prioritize the ones that we can find on search engines. And the focus on search engines helps us identify retailers that consumers in specific places are likely to come in contact with when they go looking for products. And the reason why is because our search engines use geographic information to rank order the retailers. So that could either be somewhere on a map, or like if you go to Google and search, it takes your IP address and it uses that to help prioritize the retailers in a specific place. So we can use that to help prioritize enforcement authorities' priorities, because we can find retailers in specific places that have political jurisdiction. And we're primarily focused on vaping retailers right now because there are a ton of indications that that's the largest market online. And so we focused on them. The main focus that I'll cover here is a pilot study we did. It concluded last year or 2 years ago. And that was done in San Diego County. But we're also currently doing one for the whole state, a study for the whole state. But the focus on San Diego County was a good one because there's a great natural experiment that was happening at the time. So I already mentioned that our state law, our state flavor restriction didn't cover online sales of tobacco, but we already had a lot of local jurisdictions within the county that also had their own flavor restriction. So City of San Diego is the largest one. It's a separate political entity from the county, and the county's laws do not preempt the local municipalities. So in San Diego County, it's kind of a weird county. It has 28 policymaking jurisdictions within the county that are not subject to the county's law. So they have their own political authority. And eight of them have had their own laws at the time, so we could check if the retailers were complying with the flavor ordinances in those places. And our overarching approach had three parts. The first is find retailers. The next is inspect their websites. What are they selling? So the main thing we're interested in are they selling flavored tobacco, but we could also look for lots of other things. And then in addition to just finding their websites, we wanted to actually implicate a compliance issue. And the way we did that was to buy things from the retailers. So we worked with a group of people to buy products. We collected retailers in two ways. One is using a map, so like a Google map or a Yelp. Those were the two that we focused on. That we call a map-based search. The other way is through a search engine, and we take. So this involves like executing a number of searches around San Diego County and using words like order vape, and then taking the top 20 results. We focused on those because nobody really goes beyond the top 20 in most search browser sessions, is what researchers have found. And doing a map-based search also allows us to look at other things. So on the left is an example of a search for vape shops in San Diego County. And so those all come with geographic information. And because it comes with that geographic information, we can do things like compare it to our state licensing list, which is published by the California Tax and Fee Administration. So if a retailer is on my list and they're not on their list, it potentially suggests they don't have a license. So we can identify unlicensed retailers in that way. Another way we can get address information is from the return address on a product. Then we review, once we have the retailers, we review them all the ones with websites, to look for things like, would they ship to us in California? What are the methods they use? Do they have flavored products? other types of tobacco products. And then what we're seeing more and more now is that most retailers who are selling nicotine are also selling some other psychoactive thing. So Delta 8 is the one I'll focus on in a little bit, but there's also things like what people are claiming legal magic mushrooms. I'll mention that in a bit. Lots of opioids that retailers are also claiming are legal. When we do our audits, we use this archiving software. So it stores our browser sessions in case someone from law enforcement wants a verification of what we found. The main reason we do that is because nothing on the internet is static. It goes up and down all the time. Retailers are changing over time. Traffic information we also can get. We subscribe to newsletters and social media to understand how retailers are using that. Here's an example of one that they emailed me. So it's a vape that you can play Pac-Man on and comes in 12 awesome colors. So we get how they're trying to market themselves. And then for the main component of our studies, we work with what we call buyers. So that we worked with 16 in the pilot, and we split them into teams of 8, teams of 8 paired, where they were paired on the retailer that they were buying from. So each retailer got 2 purchases. One was to a buyer in part of the county, so say San Diego City, where we had a local flavor restriction, and one was somewhere else in the county without. E-gift cards, here's a list, then gave them a list of products to buy. Focusing on flavored vaping products for this study. And so once the buyer makes a purchase, they receive the products, and this allows us to collect lots of relevant policy information, like did they get an ID check? What delivery method was used, and this focused on USPS. And then it also helps us know where the retailer is. Our searches were done in San Diego, but they could have been anywhere in the country. And also from receipts and contents inside of the package, we can know if they paid taxes. Okay, so now that we're out of the nuts and bolts, what did we find in our study? And to us, these were quite striking, not really what we expected. I mean, we thought the market was a little bad, but maybe not this bad. So in San Diego County, our searches on Google Maps and Yelp returned 311 vape shops. So this isn't the whole representation of retailers. This is just ones that claim that they're only selling vapes. And 37 of those vape shops had a website. 20 of those sold flavored tobacco, and 5 with websites were in areas of the county that restricted online sales, so San Diego County. One thing that we weren't expecting that we ended up finding was that one retailer here was in the city of San Diego, and they said, well, we don't sell flavored tobacco at our shop, but if you want to order it, our website is located on one of the Indian reservations in San Diego County. And so you can order it, because since we're on tribal land, we don't have to follow any laws. We set our own laws. So you can order anything you want from our website. So if you have any flavored products, or if you want flavored products, please buy from our website. Which I don't know the answer. I don't know if that's in fact true, or in my knowledge has not been tested legally. Another shop, so San Diego, the city of San Diego is about 3 hours from Arizona, to the Arizona border. And another shop said there's no flavor restriction in Arizona. So if you need to buy flavor products in California, please order from our website and we'll fulfill it through our Arizona site. So we can order in. You can order in that way. So for those were the ones that we found on Google Maps and Yelp. The ones that we were looking for on Google search, returned a lot of results, and about 470 retailers or unique URLs. About 83 of those were retailers who would send to San Diego. And then almost 70% of those would sell flavored products to San Diego, is what they were claiming. These websites were pretty large. So in the 78s that we audited, they received about 28 million cumulatively, about 28.2 million visits per month. And this was just during the window that we were auditing back in 2023. And the average was a bit higher, as you might expect, for ones that you find on Google search, but it also pretty high for the ones that you find on Google Maps and Yelp. With one retailer that we were looking at having about, as a clear outlier, that one was up in LA County, getting about 3.5 million visits per month. So pretty large sites operating, at least here in California. And although the average, was lower for the ones that we found on Google Maps and Yelp, the brick and click retailers is what we call them. So they have a physical location and a website. One website still sold a lot, and this one might be of interest to those of you who are at a college campus. This is one that was right next to another college, so not UC San Diego State University. This one called itself the official vape shop of San Diego State, and that one got about close to 50,000 website visits per month. So it's kind of serving a college population. So now the rest of these findings are focused on our purchase attempts. If you look at the red bars here, so this is the successful delivery. So we ordered, like I mentioned, we ordered a bunch of products from, or tried to order a bunch of products from about 70 retailers, and roughly 67% of those came. So these were all flavored vaping products. If you look at the right bar, that's in the city of San Diego, where we had a ban on selling flavored vaping products, and it included online sales. And that bar is slightly higher than the one on the left, which is the retail, the buys that went to places in the county that did not have a restriction. So it's actually the bars are not statistically different from each other, but it suggests that these retailers are completely disregarding San Diego's flavor restriction. This was perhaps the most surprising finding to us. So I mentioned it's a federal law violation to use USPS, and 83% of the retailers sent their products to us through USPS. The only method that on here that would be compliant would be GLS, because all of these other retailers or delivery services also have their own ordinances restricting the sale or the delivery of tobacco products through their business. GLS is the only one that lets tobacco be delivered. The unsure might be a courier service, which lots of local courier services will also deliver. But we didn't see many that were doing it in our study, at least. The other one that was concerning was ID verification. All of our buyers were adults, but we could still get at metrics of underage purchasing in how the products arrived at us. So it would be concerning, if a product was just dropped, which is mostly how it happened. So about nearly 80% of the products, they had no interaction with the delivery service personnel, including no one, they didn't check their ID. Only one person in the whole study had their ID checked, and it wasn't in the interaction they had with the delivery person. It's because they weren't home and they had to go down to the mailroom to get it, and they verified it there, but it wasn't for their their age, it was for their identity to make sure they were picking up the correct package. So widespread non-compliance for age verification. This is another one showing, this is from inside a package that we ordered. And in the state of California, we have an excise tax on e-cigarettes. So it's 12.5%. The retailer's required to pay that in addition to sales tax. This retailer just flat out told us we didn't pay any taxes. And so you can see that on their packing slip or a receipt. That's another way we can get at that. The vast majority of the retailers didn't pay taxes. So I think it's something, yeah, so about 85.5% didn't comply with this excise tax law. Retailers who were located in California were more likely to comply with our excise tax, but not by much. And the ones that had a license were more likely to comply, but again, not by much. So widespread non-compliance to our tax, which is among the most effective tobacco control interventions. This was another thing that we didn't expect to see, but it might get at if the retailer is trying to be deceptive. The vast majority of the packages didn't indicate anywhere on the outside of the package that it was a tobacco product. And some of them did things like this. This is one thing we saw from a retailer here in Oceanside, which is an area in San Diego County. On the outside of the package, which is on the left, that's the name they use, with Sam Neo is who they claim to be, which could be a person, but if you Google it, which I don't recommend, it might be a joke on who's ever doing this kind of compliance check. Is actually also the name of a popular sex toy, which I did not know. So they're using that on the outside of the package, and then on the inside, same address, right? But they swapped out their name for their actual business name. And what we find, if you look over all the packages we ordered, almost none of them labeled themselves as tobacco, and almost all of them display their actual business name, or did not display their actual business name. So about 11% actually did. And the ones that did are not potentially descriptive of a vape shop. So there's lots of trying to hide who you are as a retailer that we were finding there. But the key takeaway in all of this, so if nothing else, I hope you take away, is that in almost all of our focus on policy, and we've mentioned a little bit in our previous presentation, the focus has been on a brick and mortar retailer and the enforcement that happens there. So things like the sign-on program sends groups of people into the stores to do compliance checks. And there's almost been no focus on online sales in terms of a state and local licensing program. And a lot of that's just, the response is just to throw up your hand and say it's hard. But I think what these results suggest is there is a way to do something about it, and that there are findings that you can have that have compliance and implications, and there's a possibility to do something about it. And if we ignore it, it might put products in people's hands that we as citizens don't want. So, for example, like youth, there's lots of steps that these retailers are taking to circumvent our age restrictions and flavor restrictions, which are designed to prevent early uptake among youth. Okay, can I take questions now on this before I do the second part? Does that seem okay? I feel
Absolutely,
like
yes.
I'm wanting to break up lecturing for a second and then see if I have any questions on this, and then we'll go in to talk about Delta 8.
Yes, that would be great. So we have
Let me
so a
stop
restriction.
sharing for
We
a
have,
second.
so a restriction in the county means sales in the county are prohibited, but sales to someone in the county from a company outside the county are legal. Is that correct?
So it varies widely, and there is no current policy database that has an answer to that for every locality, even in like small areas. So I've asked that same question to the state of California, and I've got the answer for San Diego County. But what you have to do is go in and read how it's defined as a sale, or what a retailer is defined as. And many of them are just ambiguous, and some of them are specific. So the recommendation is to have policy making jurisdictions be as specific as possible and explicitly include online sales. So then in the state of California, we've been making amendments to our policies to where it's very specific that it covers online sales. But a question for me that I had and I'm curious if Surratt knows, if the vape ban explicitly covers online sales, that would be one that I would be curious if you know.
That one I'm not sure of, Dr. Leaf. I can look that up and I'll answer shortly.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to know.
Casey has her hand raised. Casey. Oh, wait. You're still on mute.
No. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the first half of your presentation. It was excellent. So my quick question for you is, I know you mentioned the PACT Act. And I just kind of quickly Googled that because I've heard of it, but I've never really super looked into it. And so is it strictly speaking on the sales of nicotine products like the e-cigarettes? Or so I asked this because I run a vape disposal program. And one thing that I've learned is I've presented this throughout the country, and one thing, especially in Kentucky, is we're so rural. So there's a lot of people that don't have access to recycling centers. But I have a recycling center I work with that's willing to have people send products that they're trying to, properly dispose of. Would that qualify in that act?
So is the disposal taking proceeds from that?
Yeah. So yes, they are.
It might push the limit. So my understanding of what wouldn't apply is like if I wanted to send you a vape and I mailed it to you in the mail, that wouldn't apply. It's like a commercial, anything where there's some profit being made, or maybe not even profit. If there's a transaction happening on a routine basis, that's what they're really trying to prevent.
Okay, gotcha.
So if I were you, I would do things like talk to UPS or FedEx and say, this is what we're doing. Please don't cancel our business.
For sure. Well, I luck out because I can hand deliver mine. It's just I don't want to go telling people to send it through the mail and then get them in trouble. So I'll try to do some follow-ups and get some seal of approval.
And there are other couriers, like GLS was another one I mentioned. Yeah, that would be compliant. They're a little more expensive, but it would be a way that would be compliant.
Okay, thank you so much.
And Surratt, did you want to share what you had found, and then we'll take a question from Al?
Yes, Dr. Leaf, you had a question about whether or not the Kentucky vape ban covers online sales. It does. So unauthorized vapes cannot be legally sold or shipped to folks in Kentucky.
Yeah, so that would be an interesting one. See if you can buy some. That's an even stricter policy than we have, right? So ours is just flavored. If you were an unflavored, it would be compliant, right? And I actually
tried buying a vape the other day, and they had a section that stated they would ship through a third-party carrier. So
yeah, I would not be surprised if it's similar to what I already presented. Like almost all of them send.
All right, we have a question from Al.
Again, thank you, Eric. That was really great. Really quickly, I represent Callaway County's a Substance Abuse Prevention, or ASAP, and we have a youth council, and we currently had done what we called an environmental scan. You're saying go into the brick and mortar and actually see if they're compliant to selling to specifically the youth, because the flavor is the one that they're attracted to the most with all the varieties. Would you think that we could do a smaller version of the online research with the youth to see if it gets sold to them? I mean,
Yeah.
you said something about the age in your research that they don't necessarily ask, but that's where they would go next, is they would go to buying it online.
Yeah, you definitely could. I mean, at a first step, the first thing you could do is Google and find the retailers that come up where you are, and take the top 20 and try to do buys from those 20. Then the other way would be to go look for the vape shops on Google Maps or Yelp in your area, and then find the ones that have a website that you could buy from, and then in those you can look, are they selling flavors, which would be potential concern.
And the second part would be, would there be a place we would report this? Like, what would we do with the data once we had it in Kentucky here?
Well, if they're selling vapes, there's this law that Surratt mentioned. There's a ban on all vaping products. So you could report it to the ones that were mentioned before. I think up in the chat, there were a few resources for compliance reporting. So in that case, if you were able to buy a vape, you could report that you bought a vape to the compliance authorities on that. And then, so this would be another indication of a SINAR issue. If a youth was able to buy a product, you could report it to the SINAR officer. I've actually met the SINAR officer for Kentucky at a conference report. He's great. So you should definitely go talk to him.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, that's what I would do. And I think it's worthwhile. It's not that much of an effort to explore it if it's a small area, and something you could do with youth as a part of your routine compliance activities.
Thank you.
Just start getting a handle on it. Okay, let me go quickly through this last part. Okay, so the other thing the next thing I want to focus on is this product called Delta 8 THC. And the reason we were starting to pay attention to it is among the retailers that we were auditing, we found that about 36% of them were selling some type of hemp-derived product. Most of them were selling, or most of those selling hemp-derived were selling CBD. But then here's what I call the alphabet soup of other hemp-derived cannabinoids. So Delta 8 THC is the one that pops out the most. So about 21% of these nicotine retailers are also selling that, and these are in California. And I'll mention I'm mentioning California, but I'll get back to why that's important later on. There's also this other one that's what retailers are calling hemp compliant Delta 9 THC, which is the actual molecule that produces a high in marijuana, that retailers are claiming that they can sell in a federally legal manner. And I won't go into all of these other ones, but again, I call this kind of the alphabet soup. So it's all claimed to be some type of cannabis, and the vast majority of those molecules don't naturally occur in cannabis. So they're some type of synthetic version of cannabis. Delta 8 is what's called a structural analog of Delta 9 THC. So here are the two molecules. If you look at them in an OChem way, the 8 in the Delta 8 THC refers to the position of a carbon-carbon double bond. So here it's on the 8th position. On Delta 9, it's on the 9th position. When you look at them and squint a little bit, they don't look any different, right? They also are called what's called functional analogs. They both bind to a CB1 receptor, and they're partial agonists of that receptor. So they both produce the cannabis high, Delta 8 has a slightly weaker binding site affinity, so it produces a slightly weaker high. Manufacturers know this, so when they sell products, so for example, a standard dose of a gummy in a recreational market, like we have in California, is between 5 and 10 milligrams. And the standard dose of a Delta 8 gummy is about 25 milligrams. So you're upping the dose, knowing that it's slightly reduced potency. Delta 8 is also, or THC, the group of compounds that includes Delta 8 and Delta 9, is also really close in chemical structure to CBD. So here's CBD on the right. This is Delta 9 on the left. The only thing missing is the hydroxyl group that needs to be completed in order to form a THC. And lots of manufacturers know this, and it's really easy to convert CBD to THC. You could do it by getting a bunch of CBD and a little bit of an acid base from the store and pouring the acid base in your CBD, and it'll make a ton of THCs. It's that easy. You can find YouTube videos how to do that. So lots of companies are making Delta 8 THCs and THCs in general by doing that acid addition to CBD and producing large quantities of it. Delta 8 doesn't occur in large amounts in the cannabis plant that's mostly Delta 9 THC, but because of this conversion, you can produce it from hemp fairly easily in a way that would be compliant with this federal farm bill, which some of you might be thinking, why is Mitch McConnell there? He's the author of the farm bill. So that was a federal law that first came into place in 2014 and then was amended in 2018. It's a part of what's called the Agricultural Act, and it sets industry standards for farming practices. And one thing the 2018 Farm Bill did was change the definition of marijuana to include this 1/3% dry weight clause, which allows some hemp products to be sold without the Delta 9 THC. And you might ask, why would we do this? It's because hemp has a lot of industrial purposes, things like making clothes, a lot of construction materials, things like this. And so what's included in there is medicines, and what a lot of manufacturers have claimed is Delta 8 THC is a medicine or a derivative of hemp. And so we can sell that legally as long as we're compliant with this clause, right? This 1/3% clause. And so this is one manufacturer, 3G, that's based in Indiana. Lots of my family is from Indiana, and their claim that they can do this in Indiana, even though Indiana has one of the most restrictive marijuana use laws in the country, where even possession of a single joint can come with a $5,000 fine or incarceration. And they're saying we can do this because we have this federal law. They even are a NASCAR partner, so they have a car in the race, 3G. So our first legal cannabis brand in NASCAR. They're also doing things that lots of cannabis brands, like in California, they can't do this. So they're also a business partner with a company called Barstool Sports, which is a national media brand, and they have a corporate partnership. You can see 3G there in the background. And so they're using a lot of these methods to sell products that in ways that aren't allowed in states that have recreational use markets. And seeing the time, I'm going to go through this quickly, but here's some of the things we found. The markets for these products are mostly in places where they're not legal markets. So places like Indiana would be a great market for cannabis or for Delta 8 THC because you can't get the good stuff, right? So a market is much smaller in a place like California, where you can go to a dispensary or order marijuana. And this is represented first here in Google searches. We've also done a survey of this and where people self-report their use of Delta 8, and it kind of confirms the same findings. So only about 5.5% of adults in recreational use states report using Delta 8 THC, and about 13% in places where all marijuana use is illegal. Another thing we found by looking at self-reports of adverse events with Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC is a lot of the symptoms that you would expect from acute cannabis intoxication are also what we see for the Delta 8 as Delta 8 adverse events. Things like anxiety, cough, paranoia, saying you accidentally took too much, or increased heart rate or panic attack. Like classic cannabis overdose symptoms are what you're seeing with Delta 8 products. I've argued for a while this is a loophole, that the federal law never intended to allow this market to come into place. And a lot of the reason why I think it's a loophole is there's lots of issues that we've tried to address as people have become more comfortable with cannabis use. Things like not letting brands package their products in confusing branding. So these are Delta 8 products that mimic candies that are popular among kids. So things like Sour Patch Kids. Very little on this suggests that it's a THC product. Here's Airheads and Warheads. So in a state like California, if you're selling a compliant recreational product, you can't do this. If you have, but in most hemp systems, we haven't anticipated this type of practice. So you have companies who are selling products like this. Mitch McConnell actually agreed with me. No, he didn't tell me he did, but the author of the Farm Bill said it was a loophole. This wasn't my intention in the 2018 Farm Bill, and says a lot of companies are taking advantage of this agricultural act by selling psychoactive substances that are clearly similar to the effects of cannabis. So in the fall of last year, which was when the government kind of got hung up in or I forget the name of it, but as a part of the government opening back up the budget bill, included the disallowing of things like Delta 8 and all of the other psychoactive THCs that could be produced from hemp in that bill. So now later this year, the federal law should cover these products, but it's still an open question of whether states will allow them to be sold. So Surratt mentioned they're legal in Kentucky, and there's lots of states that have said Delta 8 is legal in our state. There's lots of states that have said recreational cannabis is legal in our state, even though federally marijuana is illegal, right? So there's still a question of, will the federal government preempt a state who decided to introduce a market for Delta 8 products? It's still kind of an open question, and one that will have some policy implications that will need to be ironed out. I'm going to skip over this stuff because we're running out of time, but quick note, other retailers are selling things like legal magic mushrooms now, and here's a few examples of that. And this is from an Amanita muscaria. You have my slides, you can read that if that interests you. FDA says it's not legal, but there's still lots of retailers selling it. But the main goal there that I want to get at is, in my view, cannabis is already legal in Kentucky. Delta 8 is being sold everywhere. I was in Kentucky over winter break, and I saw tons of Delta 8 retailers all around. Delta 8 is marijuana. So if your patients want to get it, they can get it, and they can get it for recreational purposes. I wouldn't, as a person talking to clinicians, I wouldn't treat it anything other than actual cannabis. So that it's already there. I know there's a medical system, and hopefully that will help give clear clinical guidance on it. But it's there if someone wants it. and it presents a bunch of health risks, and it's not a very well regulated system. So it's something I would pay close attention to. Thanks for letting me come talk to you about some of the challenges we're facing, and hopefully gave some good insights to you. If you want to stay in touch or hear about any of the research we're doing in my lab, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. There's the URL to our website, and happy to chat with you more beyond the talk too. So thanks for letting me come present.
If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bhwell.uky.edu.